We all know how good the iPhone 12 Pro is for low light photography. What we're doing today though is testing it in low light video. Let's put this thing to the test. G'day guys, Shane Mostyn here. Today we're talking about low light video with the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Why is it a good camera? We'll get into that in just a second. If you're new here, everything I talk about today is down in the description below. If you haven't subscribed, I do 2 videos each and every week all about small sensor photography. That is your phone, action cameras, GoPros, all those sorts of things, each and every week, twice a week. So subscribe to the channel and you'll see what I'm doing. If you have subscribed, you're a bloody legend. So with the year that we've had, basically everyone's plans have just gone out the window. I was planning to bring you a video this year about how to shoot fireworks with your phone. And the way we do fireworks in our little town here is that we do a lot of fundraising through the year with different events. And because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to do any of that fundraising, so no fireworks. What we did do though is some of the community groups in town, they applied for grants through the government and they got some dollars together and they put on a fair for 3 nights. That is like, you know, show rides and Sideshow Alley and that sort of thing. And so I thought I'll go down there and I'll shoot some video for that for you and show you how to maybe take some photos there. Well, I did, and they'll come up next week. But what this video is about is shooting video with your iPhone 12 Pro in low light conditions, and it does a bloody good job. Have a look at this video first. It goes for about a minute. All of this is shot with the iPhone, with the exception of a couple little bits here, and I'll write a little bit down the bottom there that was shot with the GoPro, but everything else was with the iPhone. I was pretty impressed with what this can do in such low lights. Have a look.
When we were younger, we used to sit on the grass among the flowers. We just let the days pass by. People would tell us to get a grip of ourselves and get a job. We didn't care what we were told, 'cause when we were younger, we used to sit on the grass and go, damn, I don't wanna grow old. I wish I could turn back time. Stay up all night singing songs on the terrace. We didn't mind sitting out in the cold. It was impossible to make us embarrassed. We were free. Do you remember stealing smokes from your parents? Sometimes we got a bit out of control.
So that's not bad. It's all mostly with the iPhone. All the low light stuff was certainly with the iPhone, which is what I really wanted to test. And you would have seen, for those who don't know, that's my wife in that video bit there, and these 2 little girls. We didn't know that they were going to be there, but they're 2 of our nieces and they're great little kids, and they were happy enough to play along and let me capture some video of those guys. So what we want to talk about here are really 4 key things about videoing low light with the iPhone, or videoing with the iPhone. We're going to talk about what the camera is and why it's so good for a phone camera in video. We're going to talk about the underwater capability, because you may have seen this little bit. That was all shot underwater, and I'll tell you how I did that and why I did that, I guess. We'll talk a bit about camera movement. So if you're going to start doing this sort of thing yourself, taking videos with your phone, we'll talk a bit about camera movement, and we'll talk a little bit about the slow motion stuff there. You would have seen some speed ramping, going from slow to fast or fast to slow through different parts of that video. So let's talk about this camera first and why it's so bloody good in low light. So with the iPhone 12 Pro, the thing I really like about this is that all 4 cameras, that is the ultra wide, the regular, the zoom, and the front facing camera, the selfie camera, they're all 12 megapixels. And It's easy enough to get bogged down in megapixels when you're looking for phones and comparing phones and that sort of thing. But the number of megapixels, to be honest, it's not irrelevant, but it's not far from being irrelevant. All 12 megapixels. What matters though is this number. This number is the size of the megapixel. So it doesn't really matter the number of megapixels that are on that sensor. What matters is the size of those pixels that are on that sensor. So for example, you could have a camera, a phone camera that's got 100 megapixels. And I think there's even some around that do actually have 100 megapixels. But the size of those pixels are still quite low. So the bigger the pixel, the more light can come into that sensor. The smaller that pixel, the less light that comes into that sensor. We'll use this box as an example. And with this box, say we put 50 megapixels into that box. So there's 50 of these items in this box. So they're quite small. Less light hits each individual one. If we said, say, 10 into this box, same size box, sensor, the pixels are larger. The larger the pixels, the more light it can capture. So but in saying that, there has to be a nice equilibrium between the size of the sensor and the number of megapixels. So you could say this box is the sensor and I only want 2 megapixels. Well, it's going to get a lot of light coming into it, but this image will look pixelated. So you need a nice balance between the two. There are plenty of phone cameras out there that this number, the size of that pixel, doesn't even reach 1. So having 1.7 on a phone camera, it's pretty bloody impressive. Some cinema cameras go up to 8. I think some even go to 9 because their sensors are quite large. But on a phone, 1.7, that's pretty bloody big. I don't know if there's anything bigger than that today as it stands right now. So the iPhone 12 Pro Max has a IP of 68, which means it's water resistant, or it's not waterproof, it's water resistant to about 6 meters, I think that means, for roughly 30 minutes. So you can absolutely dunk this thing into the water and it'll be fine. If you get water in the charging port, but next time you plug that charging port in and there's water still in there, it will actually get a warning on the screen to say, don't charge it right now, it's not going to work, it needs to dry out properly. You will absolutely kill the phone though if you're going to soak it underwater for a long time outside of that IP6 rating. So when I'm shooting these ducks here, I looked at those ducks where the kids are playing, and the idea of this game here is that they scoop up the ducks with the net and they put it into the basket, and however many ducks they get with X amount of turns is the more prizes they get. So I thought, how can we capture this? Well, I thought, well, there's water. I've got a waterproof phone. So I turn my phone upside down for a lot of the video that I shoot and a lot of the photos that I shoot. I'll link up the top here to how I shoot reflections, and basically the principles are exactly the same. But if you hit the record button, put it underwater first, then bring it out, with the LiDAR that's on this phone, it picks up the distance and focuses almost immediately. You don't even need to do anything. It just works automatically. So if you're trying to get creative with some of the video that you're doing, absolutely throw that sucker underwater a little and bring it out. You get some pretty cool effects. As far as camera movement goes, I try to use what's around at the time. There's different ways you can hold the phone. The more contact points that you have on the phone. Around this fair though, there were lots of these guardrails, so you couldn't get too close to the rides and stuff. I used these rails as often as I could to get slider shots. So instead of using this sort of bit of kit, I can just drag my hands along the top of the slider, along the top of the rail, and it gives it a nice panning sort of a shot. So really the rest of it is using your own imagination and using what's around you to steady yourself. In saying that, the stabilization on the iPhone 12 Pro Max is pretty bloody good. Didn't even consider taking a gimbal with me last night. I just used it all handheld. There's a couple of things that you should be mindful of when you're still shooting with video. One is it's a small little camera. So these little movements like this, they will look exaggerated in the final product. The way I suggest that you hold your phone is at least arm's length and move your whole body with the camera. It'll bring the camera out from you. It'll give a more cinematic feel because all the cinema cameras aren't this big. They're going to be this big. So keep it out from you and move it around like that. What I'll do, a lot of the video stuff that I've learned when I started this channel, I learned from Learn Video Online with a guy named Steve. He's got a great YouTube channel. I'll link it down the bottom here. He doesn't sound as authentic Australian as I do. He's a POM, so he speaks a little bit weird, but I'll link him down the bottom there. He is a sensational resource for learning video with your phone, or with all sorts of cameras, but he does a fair bit with the phone. He does all these cool movements. I'll link it down the bottom. Definitely worth checking out his channel. I learned a lot from this bloke. Let's talk about speed ramping and frame rates and all that sort of boring stuff, but we'll try not to make it boring. So when it comes to frame rates and speed ramping and slow motion, things like that, I generally do it all in the video aspect on the phone. I don't use the slow-mo aspect on the phone. I just use the regular video recording. So if you go up, when you go into video, go at the top and you've got on the top right hand side there, you've got 4K. If you touch that, it'll change to HD, which is 1080p. Change it back to 4K for the 4K resolution. Next to that, you've got the frame rates. Now, basically I will slow things down by going up to 60 frames a second. I'll slow that video down on the computer in Final Cut Pro to 30 frames a second. Basically, it makes it look slow-mo without it being jerky. Slow-mo. Make sense? But if you did not want to use the computer to do it, you can do it in the phone. Just go into slow-mo. But if you're not sure how high a resolution it's going to record, go into settings, go into camera, and you'll see there record slow-mo, and it gives you two options. It gives you 1080p, 120 frames a second or 240 frames a second, and that is sensational. That little bit of video footage I did before with the slow-mo of the water, that actually was done this way at 240 frames a second. That's how you can get that slow bullet motion, if you like, with the slow-mo effect. But this little video here with the two girls in the bumper car, that was shot at 60 frames a second. I just slowed it down to 30, and the effect is quite good. The last little bit to talk about are these bloody lights. iPhones are horrendous for this lens flare when it comes to looking directly into lights. I did a video about this with still photos. I'll link it up the top here and how to deal with that with photography. But in video, it's basically impossible to deal with. What I did though is I grabbed Sarah's iPhone 11 Pro and I shot the same footage as what I did with the 12, and they weren't there. Isn't that interesting? Basically, I don't think there's anything that you can do about it. You can move away from the light. I shot a few different portraits of Sarah last night, and that'll be in next week's video of how to do that in low light. And basically, I just used the light that was around, moved her around to places that I wanted it to be to get rid of those reflective lens flares. That's it for today, guys. If you want to know more about video, let me know down the bottom, and I'll get out there and do some more of this sort of video for you. But until Friday, I'll catch you later.